Hello and welcome back to the Else Realm Diner. As ever, this diner can go anywhere in time and space, and a little bit like Doctor Who, always going back to Earth. For our second episode, we're returning to very much to the DC universe and examining the character of the Joker. I'm joined once again by my friend Paul.
Howdy.
Hello, and today I want to talk with you here at the diner about the Joker, and in particular, actually, I'd like to try and get to the point of talking little bit about who is the best portrayal of the Joker, and also who might make a good Joker, or indeed who might have maybe they'll never get cast realistically. Now, maybe they're over the hill, or maybe it could be.
We are going to end up in the weeds today,
We are
man.
going to end up in the weeds. I want to get into the weeds.
Full on golfing in the sand.
I do.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, the character of the Joker is a fascinating one, in so much as he is. Everyone seems to have an idea of who they think the Joker is, and the Joker, just like Batman, it actually exists in relation to Batman, but also is just like Batman in so much as he always reflects the time and era that he's from, and also in that sense, because of that, he's reflecting sort of the opposite side of a coin to the Bat. But it's kind of curious in so much as, I suppose, first of all, why do you think the clown is a good opposite to the Bat? I mean, like this imagery and these personas aren't sort of classically at odds. It's not like God and the devil or something like that. Why do you think it works?
I think it works because it, on a fundamental kind of Jungian level, if you will. Not so. We're going to get into the weeds. I told you, it's just going to freak people out as soon as we start this podcast.
Just for the boys and girls at home, that's Carl Jung, the psychologist.
Carl Jung. Yes. He's already mentioned Carl Jung. This is going to be no, but just as a looking at archetypes. We'll cut all this out.
Or Arkham types.
Looking at archetypes, yeah. Looking at archetypes, what represents chaos and mischief more historically than, say, the jester, and that's really what the Joker taps into. It's the court jester. It's the one person who was allowed to make fun of the king in the realm, the one person who could get away with acts of chaos, seemingly endorsed by the greatest order in the land. And I think Joker, at a primal psychological level, kind of taps into that, but also mythologically it works very well for us in the West, because this is actually a setup that we've been very much primed for in kind of the fairy tales of our youth, you know?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Characters like Rumpelstiltskin in that sense. And also, I suppose a step beyond that in terms of mythos would be characters like Loki. In many ways, Loki in the Norse pantheon doesn't necessarily represent evil so much as the agent of change. Essentially, all of those gods, all of those characters would be static in their roles were it not for him coming in and doing something a bit chaotic. And I think the more recent iterations of Joker have often they've sort of deliberately played on that chaos element. I mean, specifically, I suppose Heath Ledger's Joker is probably the most chaotic, the most sort of no intentionally pun intended here, but the most sort of live hard and fast, cause chaos, die young type thing. I can't really imagine that Joker, for example, making it to his middle ages. If you see what I mean, he was
very true. That's a very good point.
He was an agent of chaos, but the Joker hasn't always been just an agent of chaos. I mean, like when he first turned up in the 1940s. I believe he was essentially a thematic serial killer. He was I think some people have called him a sociopath, but I think that word's thrown around a bit too much, really. But he was a thematic killer, and then went on for about, was it 4 or 5 years, to be almost a bit of as kind of like a running joke. So he'd do like bank heists and kidnaps with a sort of ha 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 sort of circus type theme going on. But he wasn't.
Well, like you say, that's the theme of the book at the time, isn't it? He's just reflecting where the book's going.
Yeah, and in the same way that at the time Batman was very sort of vampish, and there was it sort of worked as a counterpoint to Batman. But then eventually he came back to being the sort of the particular dark character, I guess, that lots of people are drawn to. And in a strange sort of way, I think he is undeniably charismatic. as a character. Now,
That's a point I really want to come back to in a bit, actually, when we're talking about people who've portrayed him. Yeah.
Okay. Now I just wanted to talk a little bit about. I mean, because I suppose we should touch on who's played him in TV and film. So I suppose first of all, you have probably the first big example is in the 1960s TV series with Cesar Romero.
Yeah.
Playing probably the biggest and most technicolor Joker that any of us have ever seen. And
with moustache.
With his painted moustache.
Painted moustache.
So strange. But at the same time, it worked. It worked in the Adam West series. But I mean, what do you think of the Cesar Romero Joker?
I think that's probably one of the first. Certainly for my generation, you're pretty much in my generation. So say our generation is probably the first Joker that we experience as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a very wacky, outlandish, over-the-top, big humor, big humor, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And which is funny because he has to be big in the context of a show that's already big and ridiculous. I mean, we've got let's be honest, you know, as brilliant as Adam West's Batman is, he's intentionally playing it for laughs, playing it straight for laughs. So you've got an already comedic Batman in a ridiculous situation. Therefore, the Joker has to be that much more ludicrous to even stand for anything. And that's, you know, this is, I guess, why we end up with so many huge performances in the 60s. And again, you know, in Schumacher's run in the 90s. So the bigger the backdrop, the bigger the characters have to be, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's a valid interpretation, but it certainly doesn't stand up to the scrutiny or the sophistication of interpretations of the Joker in this day and age.
Well, I think that's what's interesting is that the next big Joker that would come along would be Jack Nicholson's Joker. And yet for me, strangely enough, that is the weakest of the bunch. Now that might be a bit controversial to say, but I don't like him. I really don't like Jack Nicholson's Joker because to me he's being Jack Nicholson, especially in the context of a Joker who is post The Killing Joke, and in fact in a film which is directly inspired by, for example, The Killing Joke. I think Nicholson fundamentally misunderstood the character, and I think maybe he was cast because of his amazing performance in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and his general the size of his ego and his on-screen presence. But I don't think he was a particularly good Joker. I mean, the thing is, though, I mean, he must have made an impact on you in so much as did you saw that film in the cinema, didn't you?
Yeah. This is an interesting thing because it's a big part of the Batman phenomenon at the end of the 80s, and Jack Nicholson's personality and star power was as much a pull for the film as the fact that it was a Batman movie. In fact, for a lot of people who really only knew about the Adam West Batman, Jack Nicholson's appearance in the film gave it a certain amount of credibility or gravitas that it might not have otherwise had. So I think we have to separate his depiction of the Joker, which I would agree with you is not, you know, comic book Joker at all. He's very much playing Jack Nicholson as the Joker, and separate that from the cultural phenomenon of Jack Nicholson as the Joker, which I think was incredibly positive and very powerful and helped secure that character's dominance probably in the Batman mythos. So Joker was always a headliner as far as the villains went, but if you look at the place of the Joker after things like, you rightly say, The Killing Joke, which was a real turning point, and the prominence he really starts taking after The Killing Joke and the first Batman movie is that, no, Joker is number one bad guy, and it's always been this way. But of course it wasn't necessarily always that way. He had a rogues gallery for a reason, you know.
Speaking of which, I just wanted to take us on a slight rabbit trail just at this point.
Into the weeds!
Into the weeds! I recently finally got to see Lego Batman, and at some point we'll have to make a whole other episode about this. But actually, that film really highlights the rogues gallery. I mean, the fact that actually they legitimately say, "Are you making up some of these, these bad guys?"
Crazy Quill.
Yeah, exactly. Condiment
Condiment
King.
King.
Yeah.
Man,
Just excellent.
what a phenomenal look, film and Joker. What a phenomenal film and Joker.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It deserves its own episode. It deserves its own podcast.
It does.
As far as I'm
It does.
concerned.
It
The
does.
Lego Batman movie is stellar, absolutely stellar, and a love letter to all Batman fans everywhere.
I think so. And in that sense, actually, no. So we'll come back to that when we come to Zach Galifianakis. Zach.
Yeah.
What's his name? Zach.
Yeah.
Galifianakis.
Galifianakis.
That's it.
Yeah.
When we come back.
We're
to
sorry, Zach. If you on the 1,000,000 to 1 chance that you ever see this, we're sorry if
He'll
we
be
get
so
your name.
offended. He'll be like, "No, everyone knows my name. Everyone says it right every time." But so it's interesting then, isn't it, that they're given in that sense, in terms of popular culture, the status that Jack Nicholson achieved for Joker, that actually there was no Joker in Batman Forever or Batman and Robin. They seem to
Because they'd made the Hollywood mistake of killing the bad guy at the end.
exactly,
Of course.
yes, and so they decided to run with that sort of continuity. And in some ways, that's probably good. It would have been strange, possibly, to see a day glow sort of black light version of the Joker in
Arguably, that's what we got, though. Arguably, that is exactly what
Two-Face.
Jim Carrey
Riddler,
and Tommy Lee Jones. Sorry, that's exactly what they were both going for.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, this is the really interesting thing between the size of the character that Nicholson brought to the screen, where he really was just intentionally stealing the moment and chewing the heck out of the scenery, whenever he's on camera. Arguably to the detriment of some of the scenes in the film, really. But between his monumental ego, the shift into second gear of Batman Returns, where the villains are more gothic, more Tim Burton-esque, but still big in their own right and certainly dominating the narrative. And then when Schumacher comes on board, you've got basically his two villains emulating exactly what Nicholson did, instead of doing, going their own way like Danny DeVito and Pfeiffer did.
And also, actually, funnily enough, arguably, with Batman versus Superman, you have a portrayal of Lex Luthor, which is existing in that shadow as well.
It feels like Jim Carrey's Riddler.
It does, doesn't it?
That's a big problem with his
feels
joke.
like there's a sort of cascade down from Nicholson to Carrey to what's his name? From his name is now playing Lex.
Lex Luthor.
I shall.
The stars are not with us today.
No, I shall quickly check.
Jesse Eisenberg.
You beat me. I was
in there somewhere.
I just typed in IM for IMDb. Yeah, exactly.
Harrison, faster than Google.
So in that sense, then you have all of these. You have these performances which are very much feeling the legacy of the Jack Nicholson performance. But funnily enough, at the time, the most powerful performance, while we were getting these sort of day glow Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey, the performance, the mantle really fell to Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill, damn straight,
doing the voice in the animated series. And this is where a little bit like the character of Batman, for me, in some ways, that is the Joker. That isn't Mark Hamill's Joker. That is the Joker. For me.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the case for many people, especially people who weren't necessarily going to comic book stores and collecting every issue as kids, but they were getting their Batman through different sources, like different media. That has defined the Joker for so many people, and probably a good couple of generations now.
I think so, and in the same way that you just couldn't imagine. Really, a faceless Batman being voiced more effectively than Kevin Conroy. There's a reason why everywhere Mark Hamill goes, people say, "Do the voice." It is just perfect.
Yeah.
But I do have a criticism, and that is that in other media, away from the animated series, the Joker, as portrayed there, he's not perfect. He isn't perfect, and that for me is represented in particular by the amazing Paul Dini. And his writing, but for example in Mad Love.
Yeah.
So the cartoon iteration of Mad Love, I think, is okay. Well, it's pretty darn good, in fact. But there's for some reason whenever I try to read the comic, first of all I think the artwork is a bit sort of washed out and it's not perfect. It's sort of it's not as engaging as the comic. I'm sorry to say, it's just not. Maybe it's something to do with the paper quality as well. It's a bit sort of plasticky, but he's not as he is far closer to being the Cesar Romero kind of clown at times than he is to being the tragic character who sort of rounds off, who bottoms out, as it were, for me at least, the full character of the Joker. So while the animated series Joker, and the thing is, I'm being deliberately harsh here. I'm trying to like a sculptor at marble. I'm trying to get down to a Joker here. Well, the animated series Joker is probably the Joker for me. He's not the perfect Joker in so much as I can't imagine him existing, if you know what I mean, in the real world. I don't know. Does that sound a bit? You've got a bit quiet there.
Interesting. No, I'm trying to process this, mind-blowing revelation that Mark Hamill's Joker isn't perfect, and I'm having trouble with it, really. But no, I think it's certainly true that he's closer to the wacky clown prince of crime, for instance, than Heath Ledger would ever have managed, or been able to go in Nolan verse. And that could be a strength or a weakness, depending on, I think in the context of the animated series, it works well because they had to keep it child friendly. And you can see how Hamill's Joker can be
he can flip
grittier.
on a dime. Yeah, he can certainly just suddenly, the voice will drop, the laugh will change.
Lest we forget, you've got Hamill's Joker as part of the animated series Dini-verse, so to speak, and you've got Hamill's Joker as part of the Arkham Asylum video games, and then you've got Hamill's Joker as part of the Killing Joke animated film.
Yes, now and that was something that I was going to bring us on to in just a moment. But in that sense, you're absolutely right. Hamill's Joker does exist beyond the cartoons. So perhaps we'll come back to that in a moment then.
Let's put a pin in that one and come back to it.
Put a pin in that grenade. But actually, the next step, the next logical step is, as you just touched on, is Heath Ledger's Joker. A performance that he took so seriously that arguably it contributed to him eventually dying, in so much as how he was dealing with his his sleep cycle was interrupted and so on and so forth, and he ended up sadly ODing on sleeping medication. It's a performance that he did very intensely, and I think that intensity comes through very powerfully in The Dark Knight. But you see, this is where maybe I'm slightly at odds with most people, in so much as, in terms of the Batman movies, The Dark Knight isn't the peak of that trilogy. It is Batman Begins for me.
That's another podcast right there. Let's stick to the Joker for now. I would have counter arguments for that.
But what I would say is that he is. If I could take Mark Hamill's voice and slap it onto Heath Ledger's Joker, and maybe give Heath Ledger's Joker a little bit more humour, active humour, he would be the perfect real world Joker for me.
Well, then that's an interesting idea, because essentially what you're saying is there's something fundamentally missing from Heath Ledger's Joker. And I personally think that as brilliant as his Joker is, and as perfect as he is in that film and in that context for that Batman, I'm not.
Well, for example, when he dresses up as a nurse,
convinced.
when he turns around as the nurse in the hospital.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, I mean so many wonderful scenes, and of course the improvisation that came later in that scene with him with the button that's not working and staying in character, so he was brilliant, and I don't want to take anything away from that. But what I would say is, and this is a big can of worms, but it starts here. Is he Jokerish enough to really be the Joker? Or is he an anarchist who looks like the Joker? Yeah. Because Joker wants different things depending on the era that he's in. But power and destruction and chaos, are seemingly the only things they've pulled out of that Joker. He doesn't value money. He doesn't value his concern isn't necessarily Batman so much as just proving Batman's wrong.
Yes. Well, and
Is
also
that
in that sense,
a part of Joker's character?
proving that the city is wrong, that civilization itself is wrong, as it were. Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, he does admit to that. It's like, I mean, he does actually say he's like a dog chasing a car. If he had a Corsi, he wouldn't know
Yeah.
what to do with it.
Yeah.
But compared to some of the other Jokers, that, as you say, it doesn't quite pan out, does it? Because the other Jokers do have they want to have, it's in that sense, there's some of the grand schemes they put together are jokes with a punchline at the end, as opposed to simply the joke being an explosion, which isn't really quite the same thing.
Well, I don't know if this is. Well, this is an observation of the films that I made recently in a conversation with my friend Riven. In fact, we get into these debates and can spend several days arguing about Batman on Facebook at a time. And the contention was, my contention was that for a Batman movie, if you look at Nicholson's Joker, going back to him briefly, he's not obsessed with Batman at all in that film. Batman is the name to his pain, certainly, and he's not happy about Batman, but he's not fixated with him. He's a byproduct. Even when Batman confronts him at the end of the film, the Joker is, and Batman reveals the information that, you made me. The Joker laughs it off and makes a joke about it, as if he remembers, but just doesn't care. Now, on one side, that's atypically Joker, that he doesn't care about these things. I just do things. He does things, and they don't matter to him at all. On the other hand, I think since we've been seeing Joker on film, we've never had a translation of that idea that the Batman and the Joker are caught in this thing and are really fixated with each other. We don't have this twisted kind of unhealthy relationship that they have in the comic books, particularly as depicted in Killing Joke.
Or indeed that eventually Batman can break free of that. And the fact that possibly the Joker comes off worse. So, for example, as we see in The Dark Knight Returns, or actually elements of Under the Red Hood, where you have a resurrected Jason Todd who's like, why have you killed this son of it? And he's like, well, because he's not that important to me, kind of thing. If that's effectively what Batman says, is I if I killed him, he would mean more to me than myself. And whereas the Joker is often portrayed, especially for example in the Frank Miller sort of scope, as having a love obsession with Batman. Which as you say, doesn't really come across necessarily in the films. At this point, it's worthwhile acknowledging the Joker as portrayed by Zach Galifianakis in the Lego Batman movie. This Joker is a Joker who is seemingly in love with Batman. If you replace the word love with hate, in fact, it's pretty much a rom-com between the two characters, where all the Joker needs is to hear Batman say it. And that is actually probably the closest that the movies so far have come to actually acknowledging this twisted relationship that Paul refers to a few moments ago. The relationship between Batman and Joker is one of obsession, and as I said in terms of the portrayal of Batman in The Dark Knight Returns, it's an obsession that we've seen Batman break out of, and indeed in Lego Batman movie, Batman definitely breaks out of that. He likes to fight around, as he says. He hasn't just got one arch enemy at this moment, and so this is just one of the ways in which actually Zach and the Lego Batman movie really do in fact explore an aspect of the Joker's relationship to Batman beautifully, and they do it so well and so effortlessly that it doesn't feel forced, and in that sense it almost doesn't register as a key theme of the movie, even though that's kind of what the whole movie is about. I think this understated brilliance is possibly why we forgot to return to the Lego Batman movie in this video. So I just thought I'd just acknowledge that and explore a little bit of the brilliance of this version of Joker, and how this particular version really addresses that hitherto unaddressed issue of how obsession ties Batman and Joker together. You then get into other media. You get, for example, probably a high watermark would be the Joker as portrayed in Arkham Asylum, the computer game,
Hmm. Hmm.
voiced by Mark Hamill,
Yep.
masterfully so. And in that sense, that is actually probably what I was getting at when I said if you got Mark Hamill's voice and shoved it into Heath Ledger's face,
Yeah.
out would come something which would be almost perfect. And I think the Arkham Asylum video game is almost perfect in that sense.
Yeah, actually, I'd have to agree. I think this is probably closest to the mark. The genius of that Joker and that universe in particular for me is that they took everything that worked and everything we loved from the animated series and the Dini and Tim verse,
Mm-hmm.
and they put it in big boy pants.
Mm-hmm.
And they let us play in this sandbox that was, in a tokenistic way, dark and gritty, but still managed to contain all of the fun
Mm-hmm.
of that childhood version,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
of the Batman and Joker and just their universe. And so many lovely little nods and, so much fan service, which, can sometimes be a good thing or a bad thing. But in this case, it all worked so well. It all balanced so well.
Yeah, and things like having in the game, I really appreciated. There's a sort of an ongoing side quest in that game where every room you go into where the Joker's been, there are chattering teeth on the floor.
Yeah.
You have to batarang them, and little things like that. Which initially, when I was actually playing the game, I was genuinely quite annoyed. I was like, "Oh, this is just naff. This is just silly." But actually, after very very quickly, I got the tone. I got I understood it. And I thought, no, this is perfect. This is it. This is in that sense, just as in many ways Batman can't really exist in the real world.
Yeah.
Giving you the grittiness on the skin of the grittiness over the Paul Dini kind of world was beautiful. But then actually, I mean, we'll come to Suicide Squad in a moment. Because actually then that leads me down a whole path following the high watermarks of Mark Hamill in animated series, following Arkham Asylum computer game, following the Nolan verse. There are two books that really come to mind that really beautifully portray and explore an aspect of the character that I find most darkly intriguing,
Mm-hmm.
and in many ways unforgivable. The first one is Arkham Asylum Madness. Don't know have you read this one?
No, I haven't read that one.
This one is fascinating. It's got artwork which is very reminiscent in places of a serious house on a serious earth. So sort of stretched imagery, slightly surreal.
McKean kind of style. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And also moments where you're not quite sure, whose head you're in or if you're in reality or not, and this kind of thing.
Interesting.
It is very, very good. So I'd strongly recommend that you read this. And in fact, I'm amazed. I'm amazed and also quite impressed that I have and you haven't. But no. In fact, if I had two copies, I would post this through the computer for you now. There's that where he I won't. Well, in that case, I won't spoil the story. But he is a looming presence in Arkham Asylum, and what you get in this story is a sense that the staff and the inmates are all essentially equally trapped in that building, and that madness is creeping, looming everywhere. But also, as well, he does things like he eats light bulbs, for example, in order to achieve things. He's a calculating but very he's happy to self-harm as well, which is something which we haven't really seen in other versions of the Joker, with the exception of perhaps this version. Have you read this book?
Azzarello's Joker.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good book.
It was a good book. Well, it is a good book, and it's a book which clearly, I mean, if you look at the way that the Joker is drawn, clearly he's taking inspiration from Heath Ledger's
extraordinarily so. Yeah.
But this actually touches a little bit on what I was hinting at just before in Under the Red Hood, whereby there's a very strong hint that one of the scariest elements of the Joker as a character is that he's not necessarily as crazy as he would like us to think. So in Under the Red Hood, the moment when the Joker essentially stops laughing is when Jason Todd basically says precisely that. He says, "I know your secret. You're not actually that mad. You're not actually that crazy. You know, you're weak. You haven't got what it takes to exist in the real world, and so you just pretend." And he shuts up. And there's a hint of that in this book as well, where he's almost he's been stripped of some of his mythos. He's certainly been stripped of his territory in Gotham. But then he also resorts to really base and crass things, like for example, at one point he assaults, shall we say, being polite, the girlfriend of someone who's driving him around town. It's a basic crime that really is in some ways beneath the pantomime of the Joker as we see elsewhere. And this is where part of me just thinks I'd kind of like to see that explored now, because in Heath Ledger's Joker, we don't get an origin story, we don't get really an ending to that character. He is, as Chris Nolan described him, he's Jaws. He just pops up and causes chaos and then disappears. But in that sense, you don't get... I'd really like to see the Joker deconstructed, if you see what I mean.
Okay, well, this is an idea that kind of ties into notions of, you know, what a mystery is and how a villain should be portrayed. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, because I've been watching the new season, The Return of Twin Peaks. And this does tie into something that I'll talk about later, actually. But for now, I just want to kind of hover around the idea of Lynch's notion of mystery and how explaining the mystery stops people caring about the mystery. And that's very much his stance on, you know, why Laura Palmer's killer should never have been revealed as early as he was, etc., etc. I do think this applies to the Joker. I do think that the Joker not having an origin story is incredibly important to his character, and I think not explaining the Joker is incredibly important to his character.
But surely it can be done in because let me explain in so much as I've been getting into the TV series Gotham, despite a slightly rocky start. A slightly rocky start with some of the portrayal of some of the characters. There is the character of Jerome Valeska, portrayed by was it Cameron Mon?
So wait. Are you telling me that Joker's civilian identity name is basically Joker? Good Lord. I mean, I knew that show was bad, but I didn't realize it was that bad.
It's Jerome Valeska. Actually, Joker isn't that his name in... Oh, where is it? It's his name...
He uses it in one of the Dini things.
Yes,
as a...
he does. Actually, I think it's in here. I think that's why I was rifling.
It might be in Mad Love, actually.
Yeah.
Jake. He uses it as a joke, but it's the Joker's name should never have been an abbreviation of his civilian name. That is beyond awful.
That is,
Sorry.
but I mean, obviously, Jerome Valeska is... You have to work a bit hard to get to Joker there, so...
Not that hard. Come on.
But the point is, though, in that character, and there's lots of conversation happening at the moment as to whether or not he is, in fact, the Joker. He could simply be some sort of template. Red herring, in fact. But he's... what you have there, though, is a character who hasn't really been given an origin story, with the exception of the fact that he come in some way from a circus and his mum was a circus performer, and that's about it. We don't know much about where he's come from, but what we do get is we get to see him in the TV series at moments where he hasn't fully realized his persona, in so much as Mark Hamill's Joker, you have to work quite hard to get him to the point of cracking getting the chink in the armor. Whereas Jerome, at one point, is arrested. He's put in they're interviewing him in a police interrogation room, and the mask slips very, very quickly. He's vulnerable in that sense, And I think that's what I mean by deconstructing the Joker. Not so much seeing him at home in his underpants. Although actually Paul Dini does handle that quite well in the animated series. Yeah. But and certainly not looking, what's his name and what was exactly his backstory, but rather actually seeing him, I suppose, coalesce, if you see what I mean, or rather seeing what happens when he's not so coalesced. That for me is a point that's quite interesting. I think it is portrayed, for example, in especially in this book, where he's rusty, if you see what I mean. The Joker is rusty, and he's had to do an awful lot of convincing people that he's changed in order to get out of Arkham. I don't know. That's just something that just fascinates me.
I think the Azzarello book, I enjoyed it, and I thought it was a well-written book. For me, once again, this wasn't the Joker. This was I call it the thug interpretation of the Joker.
Yeah.
He's not so much the criminal genius, so much as the brutal kind of sadist.
Just the guy who'll do the thing you won't, and therefore you fear.
And Joker, just as a sadist, doesn't work for me. Really, I think Joker has to be brilliant, or he's really not a match
for Batman.
Yeah, the genius that is Batman, because it's not just being mad. Being mad is still predictable if you understand someone's psychoses. It's being brilliantly mad that makes you exceptional. That's why he's, the Hannibal Lecter, if you will. He's
well, and literally in Arkham Asylum, he's wheeled like Hannibal through in that opening sequence. So wonderful.
Yeah, that's the kind of dangerous I want to see in my Joker. I don't like the thuggish Joker. I don't mind the gangster associations, but it has to be, there needs to be that aspect of brilliance to it, just to steer it away from the mindlessly violent kind of Joker who's an attack dog.
And that is where we come to Jared Leto's Joker, I think.
Definitely.
And Jared Leto's Joker is one I probably need to see a bit more of it to really understand it. But at this point, he feels like, strangely enough, still not in that sense as weak as Jack Nicholson's, in so much as this isn't Jared Leto on screen. This is a character that he's constructed, but the character slots too neatly into defined criminal underworld. The fact that in the film he's described as being the king of Gotham, he effectively is a gangster in that sense. But there isn't a grand reveal. There's no grand scheme, and there's also very little sort of flourishes of humour to twinkle throughout. So, as you say, I mean, I know you don't like the idea of the Joker as a thug, but the Joker does something thuggish in The Dark Knight with a pencil, which is absolutely hilarious.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Make this pencil disappear. Whack. Gone.
in the context of how he does it and the joke he makes of it, it is very Joker in its own way. I mean, let's think about Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad, if I'm assuming you've seen the movie and not just the Joker stuff. So I actually watched it specifically so that I could comment on it with you this week. So you owe me one, man, because I sat through that for you.
Oh, you haven't seen the film yet?
I hadn't seen it.
Oh,
I watched it. I finished watching it yesterday. I had to break it down into 2 parts to make it palatable.
Okay.
It was not as hard a watch as I thought it would be. No. It was certainly very. This isn't. Let's not get into a review of Suicide Squad, but we need to establish the context of where this Joker's coming in. And the first big alarm bell, which is something that a friend of mine had actually previously pointed out, was that the Joker's introduced in a flashback scene. The Joker, one of the most significant villains in the DC universe, if not arguably the most significant in modern times, is introduced in Harley's flashback scene.
Yes.
In like a semi-credits opener.
Yeah.
Of the movie.
Yeah.
Now, I'm all for Harley Quinn being the focus and having the agency, and I think it's great to explore that side of it, and Harley Quinn is her own character in her own right. But I don't feel that was a very powerful or interesting way to introduce our new Joker, potentially our new Joker moving forward.
No, although I suppose the one thing that you could say is that had wonderful echoes of the Alex Ross painting. So that flashback sequence where they're spinning around dancing, there's an homage there at least to some established.
Is it an
artwork.
homage or is it an exploitation of fan service?
Well, it could be. Yeah, it could be. Okay, fair enough.
I say you could argue it either way. I mean, let's face it. That's quite a cynical film.
It is, and in that
it's-
sense, it is quite a cynical film, and it's a film which is inferior to essentially the animated version, which is Assault on Arkham.
Assault on Arkham's
Assault on Arkham
brilliant.
is excellent, and it's also shorter. Somehow they achieve all that in with half an hour less in terms of time. So yes, the film isn't the best, but it's also not as bad as some people say. You know, I mean, I like some elements of it, and some of the interpretations of characters.
Worse.
Yes, exactly.
To be fair,
but in that sense, then the Joker as Leto portrays him, I think he's inconsistent in his consistency, shall we say? In so much as he, on the one hand, he's trying to be crazy, on the other hand, he is a gangster who's successfully running Gotham City, apparently. On the one hand, he talks about, especially for example in the extended scenes in the movie, which I sent you a link to some of those scenes this morning. He talks about how, you know, you abused me, Harley. You broke me down, made me forget who I was, and this kind of thing. And you're like, what? No way. No, Harley wouldn't do. But she couldn't do that to him. But then, on the other hand, he then comes out with these lines like, I'm a state of mind. You know, this kind of which is.
I'm not a person. I'm a state of mind.
Which is just ridiculous.
That's ridiculous, but equally, that's probably closer to any version of the Joker than he achieves at any other point.
Well, probably, but he wouldn't. But I suppose the problem is that he wouldn't. The character wouldn't and shouldn't be able to actually say that. If that's what I mean. You know. I mean, because actually, in Serious House on a Serious Earth. Yeah. There's a moment in there where there's an argument put forward that the Joker represents essentially a state of being that is possibly hyper adapted to the modern world. It's a hyper ADD essentially, where he can't deal with all this in the incoming information, so he is, and so whatever is happening, he responds to it. And I think that is a more elegant way of saying I'm a state of mind. You know, that's the sort of thing that you expect a half-baked wizard, almost a stage magician, to say to someone who's a groupie.
No, I agree.
You know?
He shouldn't be saying it, but that's probably closer to a version of the Joker than he gets at most points. I mean, coming back to the Arkham Asylum Joker for a second, there was a really interesting Italian fan film. Trailer made for that. I don't know if you've seen it. If you need a link, I'll find one.
Well, I think you did send me a link, but we can put a link down below for people who are watching.
Great. Yeah, that's worth checking out. It's a really interesting interpretation, and it feeds into Grant Morrison's later takes on the Joker. So when we look at Morrison's last run, just during the Batman RAP and just prior to that with the Batman and Son, you've got this kind of infamous prose issue, which is like 663, I think it is, where we have a prose issue all written like a little storybook explaining kind of it's going through the funeral of the Joker and how he kills all of his pallbearers who are all clowns, and the rebirth and regrowth of the Joker. Now this is a really interesting idea, and I'm kind of with Morrison on this, and I know many people aren't, that the Joker is, all of the interpretations of the Joker do work, and they're all valid, and they're all pulled out of the same thing that's constantly reinventing itself, almost in the way that David Bowie is constantly reinventing itself. There's an external locus of personality. It's so externalized that he has to change in order to match what he's going up against, which again feeds back into the idea that he's a reflection of the decade and the time and the Batman comic that he's in. I think if you go back to that book, particularly kind of the last act, so to speak, where you see the rebirth and reimagination of the Joker through his own agency, you get some really interesting stuff going on. And I think it's kind of given a harder ride than it deserves, because I thought it was a really valid way to interpret the Joker.
Well,
And
in that
that's
sense,
certainly a tangent from Jared Leto, but
well, in that sense, then, do you think, unless it, well, I mean, we will come back to Leto's performance in a second, but in that sense, do you think then that's sort of comparable to what they did in the New 52 and ripping off the Joker's face?
right. Now, with the new 52, I'm only up to date up to a point. I saw the Joker's face ripped off, and I followed that the Endgame storyline. Yeah, Death of the Family and Endgame, and that's about as far as I got. I didn't really understand why they didn't make more of the Joker's kind of face slash identity going. Like, it was a random issue of Detective Comics. It didn't tie into anything, and then Scott Snyder had to explore it more fully, kind of in retrospect in his own book, which seemed a bit strange to me.
And also, I think what's strange though is that they apparently he's gone away for a while and had this great revelation, but he comes back and he's just doing what he normally does, really, except with a slightly more jealous vibe going on. You know, they didn't. They really could have gone to town on precisely this idea of an externalized locus of personality. That actually the Joker is faceless. That the fact that the Joker, in fact, doesn't really require a body, kind of thing. In some respects, obviously, I mean, beyond needing to live. But that's a small thing in the broad scope of what this entity can be, if it's supposed to be. I think that's really why when we come back to the Suicide Squad performance of Joker, he just feels strangely one note, despite the costume changes, despite the slightly weird and interesting things that Leto does with his voice, and despite being in character and sending like dead rats and things to his colleagues on the film set, which is needless.
We need to pull this out. We need to pull this out right now. This is what Riv calls paratextual wanker.
Yeah.
So Jared Leto being a paratextual wanker and trying to out crazy all former Joker actors and pull focus onto this character with this kind of bizarre method play acting outside of, in the real world with his fellow cast members. Now, I've spent a little time in Hollywood. I've even met Jared Leto, actually.
Oh, okay.
And he's always, been decent to me when we've interacted. So I have love for the guy personally, but Hollywood does weird things to people. And was that Jokerish or was that a cry for help?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm in this contract. Help me. But nonetheless, despite doing all of that, what we get on screen feels, and the reason why I say inconsistent in its consistency is so much as it's a single tone, but it's not. It's not. I don't know. What would be it's a single tone, but it's not a consistent color. If that makes any sense, if that's what I mean. It's monochromic, but it's It basically
no,
it's underwhelming.
I do know what you're saying there. Actually, there was something very off the mark and something certainly missing, very much missing, and I couldn't tell if it was because of the film that he was in, or it was something else. But certainly, like, Jared Leto should have had the potential to be an amazing Joker. In theory, he could have been an amazing Joker. He's a decent actor. He's got range. But it felt an awful lot like someone really trying too hard the entire time.
And that could simply be the pressure of script, reshoots, direction, so on and so forth. It could be as simple as that. It could be the monster of the movie. Yeah. But I mean, for example, in particular, say at the end where he's in a suit. I won't spoil the end of the film in case people haven't seen it, but he's wearing a suit. He's in the back of an aeroplane. Hopefully, you know what I'm talking about. That's something which, that's pretty cool. Again, it sort of hints at things like Alex Ross artwork and that kind of stuff. But it just didn't quite work. It's just strange. And that sort of leads me up to this question of who would make a good Joker. Now, I see, hopefully Jared gets another shot at this role. Supposedly he may well have scenes in the upcoming Sirens of Gotham City.
Right. Gotham City Sirens.
Gotham City Sirens. That's it. Sorry. And he may also possibly have something linked with Batman coming up. But again, the whole Hollywood machine, who knows what's going to happen there. But I suppose it's, let's have some fun now. Who do you think would make a good Joker?
Okay, so I'm going to go in with my number 3 choice first.
Okay.
So my number 3 choice.
Sorry.
My number 3 choice has to be, I think, Christopher Eccleston.
Oh.
Doctor Who. Various other roles.
Yeah.
I can see him as a Joker.
Yeah,
He's a solid actor. He's got range. He can do dark. He can do funny.
Yeah.
And I think he'd just look damn good. There's an internet image out there of someone who's photoshopped him up as the Joker that's phenomenally good. I'll try and find the exact picture for you.
He had a slightly manic, kind of wide-eyed smile as the Doctor, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Which would work. Yeah, I could see that working. And I mean, beyond his physicality, do you think what sort of Joker do you think he would be?
I think he'd be quite a menacing Joker.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, he's an actor with gravitas, isn't he? So I think he'd be quite a calculating, menacing Joker with that sinisterness going on.
Okay.
So he's my number 3, probably. Maybe possibly 2. 2 and 3 are interchangeable.
Okay.
What about yourself?
Well, I suppose actually let's do that. Let's do counting 3 to 1. My number 3, funnily enough, also comes from the Doctor Who universe, and that would be Matt Smith.
Interesting.
I think Matt Smith could be interesting as Joker. In so much as Matt Smith, I mean, I once went to see the BBC Doctor Who exhibition. It was it was on tour and it came to Newcastle. And first of all, Matt Smith has an immensely particular physique. Like the costume when you saw it on the mannequin. I don't think I've met people who have that smaller frame in so much as long and thin, basically. So he has.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So actually, when you see maybe the proportions of the suit that they gave him in Doctor Who slightly sort of shortened him in that sense. But when you see it in person, you get this sense of a slightly sort of Jack Skellington kind of appearance, and that I think actually Jack Skellington smushed together with Matt Smith would be a wonderful version of the Joker, I think.
I can see it. Yeah.
And I think it would work very well with that Italian clip that you were talking about, where someone is sort of envisaging a version of a very gothic Tim Burton / Serious House on a Serious Earth kind of universe. Plonk him in there, with and don't go too far with the Tim Burton, and I think you'd have something very interesting, definitely.
Fascinating. Yeah. Okay, Matt Smith.
And not so. It's hard to say. I think he'd have to be on the brilliant spectrum. I don't think he would be chaotic. I don't think he'd be particularly violent. I think actually violence may be quite difficult for that Joker. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
I think that Joker would have to be one where you think you've got him, you think you've figured everything out, and there's just something else around the corner.
So we've got a criminal mastermind.
Yeah.
Joker in this one.
I think that would be good. I
like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay. So your number 2?
Number 2. My number 2.
Mm-hmm.
There's a niche porn site. Oh, my number 2.
RateMyNumber2.com.
We're on it. This is a winner.
Yeah.
My number 2 choice for Joker, and this is kind of almost an Elseworlds Joker. So this would be potentially my Dark Knight Returns Joker now that we've lost Mr. David Bowie, because he would have been top choice, I think, for Joker for this one.
Just briefly, did you see David Bowie as Tesla in The Prestige?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's a little.
Love that.
Yeah, a little bit of spice there. Yeah.
And there are so many little flourishes and nods in The Dark Knight Returns that make me feel like his Joker is Bowie-esque, certainly, at the very least, that kind of sense of theatricality. But failing having David Bowie for that, I would go with Mr. Ray Wise, otherwise known as Leyland Palmer from Twin Peaks, Laura Palmer's father, the one who is possessed by Bob. Spoilers if you haven't watched a 26-year-old TV show. Here we have someone who shows that manic quality with quite a kind of intimate creepiness. He plays being possessed incredibly convincingly in an incredibly surrealist setting.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things make me think that this guy would have what it takes to play Joker in that kind of portrayal. Anyway,
Okay.
So I think he's a dark, sinister, messed up Joker.
Well, and didn't Ray Wise do the voice for the Commissioner, Commissioner Gordon?
Oh, yes, that may be true, actually. Yeah,
I think he
that's a good
did.
point.
Yeah, so that would be a nice connection there as well. And also, actually, thinking about it, he's got that sort of, certainly in his day-to-day existence, he's got that kind of suaveness where you imagine he could probably I mean, we didn't really expand too much on it, but we hinted at this idea of the Joker as being charming. And I like the idea of there being moments of him being almost like an old Hollywood kind of guy.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly
and then
he has that quality. He totally has that
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my number 2 would have to be, and it's a bit of a toss-up between these two for my number 1 and number 2, but I suppose almost interchangeably, my number 2 would have to be Willem Dafoe.
Oh, yes, very good.
But Willem Dafoe specifically portraying essentially the Arkham Asylum Joker. So give him hair that's a bit realistic but also a bit spiky. Give him a slightly tatty suit. Give him enough minions to do the job that he wants to get.
Oh, I love that. Why
Yeah.
didn't they do that?
Yeah. Give him a giant flower with acid, but make the flower a bit grabby, a bit grim, a bit sort of decrepit.
Yeah.
I think that would work. I think that would work. I can see it, and also I can see him being almost the way that I guess he portrayed Green Goblin in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That sort of that fractured psyche, but also actually a lack of concern for self, if that's what I mean. I can imagine Willem Dafoe, no matter how old he is, being able to portray someone who would happily, get stabbed through the hand or, shot through the stomach, so long as he could just get what he wanted to do done, I think so. I think essentially that Joker would be, if they made an Arkham Asylum as opposed to Serious House movie, that would be my Joker for that one. I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a perfect video game Joker, without question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for some people, the jury's out on whether he is just a video game character brought to life. He's been he's just been manifested. Yeah, like in Speed 2. Blimey.
My number 1. Now, this is an up and comer for me because I hadn't thought about this guy in a little while. Mm-hmm. Granted, I probably thought about him more than others because I liked his music at one stage, and this is all leading to where I'm going with this. If you've been following American Gods TV show recently, then you'll know that Crispin Glover has made his grand return to screen. Crispin Glover, as in George McFly.
Yeah.
Crispin Glover of Clowny Clown Clown fame, which is a song from the 1990s, which if you haven't seen it, you have to go and watch immediately because you'll see exactly where I'm coming from.
So are you literally saying, pause the video, open a new tab, watch it?
Pause the video, open the new tab, go and watch Clowny Clown Clown, and you'll see where I'm coming from.
Okay. Yeah.
This guy is the Joker. If you look at the quality he brings to the role of Mr. World in American Gods, to me, he's got modern Joker written all over him. Oh my God, it's perfect. He's slick, he's suave. There's madness behind those eyes, without question. He's intelligent, so he's got the idea of the criminal genius going on, but he's also clearly unstable.
Yeah.
This guy for me is the Joker. I mean, if he weren't an actor, he might have become a criminal mastermind. And again, clearly crazy, Clowny Clown Clown.
Yeah.
He's even written a song about clowns.
Yeah. Okay.
In which a clown was his alter ego, and how much he hated his alter ego. This guy, for me, is the Joker.
Right.
Hands down.
No, I like it. I'm convinced actually. I think I am converted in that sense because my number 1 is not as good as this one as Crispin Glover, but my number 1 I think still holds water. And my number 1, the reason why it's number 1 is because this is the first one that really occurred to me as someone who I'd like to see given a shot at Joker, and see, it's going to take some explanation now, but it's Brad Pitt. Now you might be going, what? But what got me was I was watching Fight Club,
Tyler Durden.
yeah, and watching Tyler Durden taking a beating, and just laughing his ass off all the way through that, in order to get that room for those guys to fight in underneath the bar. I was like, oh my god, that could be the Joker. And then if you sort of start to sprinkle in other things that Brad Pitt has done in his other roles, so even in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, there's a levity to his. I mean, in Burn After Reading, the character he plays where he's a complete idiot, that jogging. So in terms of range, in terms of a post Pretty Boy actor wanting to sort of to see what he can do, but also just that physical. That for me, that moment is better than in The Dark Knight when Batman's beating up Joker in the interrogation room. I wanted to see Joker losing teeth in that scene. You see what I mean? I wanted to see blood and snot and but that's what you get in Fight Club, and he's just laughing. He's laughing it up, not even feeling it. And obviously, we know he's just not feeling it because spoiler for 20-odd-year-old movie now. Tyler Durden isn't real, or at the very least, in that moment, you've got oh god, what's his name? Edward Norton having an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
I was watching it. I was going, that could be amazing. Replace that bouncer for Batman.
I totally see it, and I have a feeling that may have crossed my mind when I was obsessed with Fight Club for a while, and I watched it a number of times and read the book, and he's definitely. It's funny because what you've done is you've brought this full circle back to Heath Ledger, because I think Heath Ledger is basically the Joker does Tyler Durden. Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
I can see that Joker having a Fight Club and starting somewhere like that.
Yeah.
So.
And in that sense, very. I mean, obviously they say it in the film, but in a literal sense, appealing to people who are on the edge of society or who are can't get a job or whatever.
Yeah. Totally.
But I think
that's interesting. That's a really interesting choice. I've never thought about it seriously before, because you'd say Brad Pitt and your first go-to is the pretty boy, but he goes to a lot of lengths to fulfill whatever role he's given. He's actually an incredibly good actor.
He's got a great sense of humor. He's got a
great
very
sense of
nuanced
humor. I dig him
sense of art.
I dig him. I dig it. I like it. I think it could work. And actually, that would have been a good alternative to the Leto choice if we're talking about, ex-Fight Club people and pretty boys, who have acting ability. That would have been a really interesting choice.
I think it could have been. And actually, also, if you think about even his role in Seven, that's essentially the bad day.
That is his bad day. So true. That's his Killing Joke bad day. Oh, man. I mean, and there's an honourable mention there as well, Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
Honourable mentions.
Yeah.
Kevin Spacey. I can see it. Also, and this was also suggested in one of the many back conversations that I had with Riv. But the actor that plays Hollis Mason in The Watchmen, what's his name again?
Oh, I'm not sure actually.
Stephen McCarthy.
Ah, okay.
Plays the old version of Hollis Mason, I believe, in Watchmen. Yeah, Stephen McCarthy. Yeah. He plays Hollis Mason, the original Night Owl in Watchmen. And again, if you were going for an old Joker, Dark Knight Returns style, there's an honourable mention there.
And actually that voice is good because it sounds like someone who a little bit. We keep on using Heath Ledger's Joker as a reference point, but a Joker who maybe this guy's been smoking, every day of his life.
For sure.
He's got this again, that lack of self-preservation going on.
I'm still trying to figure out where Leto was going with his Joker laugh. Actually, I'm still trying to figure that out because it just grated on me in all the wrong ways every time I heard it.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the most amazing things about the Joker character is the opportunity to use the laugh. I mean, Hamill describes it as like an instrument, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You have the Joker. You have a sinister laugh. You have a jubilant laugh. You have a scared laugh.
Yeah.
Whereas again, it was monotone, slightly disappointing.
It's a creaking cupboard.
Yeah.
It's literally.
Yeah. It's closer to DeVito's Penguin, actually.
That was more Burgess Meredith, wasn't it, than Danny DeVito?
Yeah. Well, let's tell you what. Here's a point to end this particular episode on. Then, how about if we go down the rebirth direction, and if we pretend that there are 3 Jokers?
See, I've not read that story arc yet. I've only read the first part of the Apocalypse War, is it? Where Batman gets Metron's chair and is suddenly a god, and he's like, "Who is the Joker?" And he's like, "Impossible." There's 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
That much I know.
That as a premise, then I suppose that's all. That's all, again, without spoiling it for anyone. Who would be your 3 then? Given that we've just mentioned. 6.
Given the ones. Oh, this is tough now. Given the ones that we've just mentioned.
And in that sense, who would be a trinity, if you see what I mean?
Because you've got to have Jokers. If you're going to have 3 Jokers operating in the same universe, they all have to be distinct and different enough to provide different challenges and be a different side of this Joker personality, all of which we've seen over the years. Mm-hmm. And that's tough because I think that all of my choices go with the charismatic mastermind who's sinister more than anything else. I think Ray Wise is probably more different from Eccleston and Glover. Mm-hmm. So if I were to choose between Eccleston and Glover, it would be Glover because I think Glover's just perfect for it. Mm-hmm. So Glover's definitely one of them.
Okay.
And I really like Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say, would you take Willem Dafoe? And then that 3rd role, then would you take a gamble on Pitt?
He's different enough from the other 2 that it's really interesting. But is he? Okay, you go. I'm not sure. I got to think about this.
No. Well, I think that's it. I think that my trinity in that sort of rebirth scenario would be you've definitely sold me on Crispin Glover. I think Ray Wise. Wise, is it Ray Wise?
Ray Wise, I think. It is,
would be good. I've also seen. A friend of mine once suggested Hugh Laurie. I'm not convinced. I think they're just going, oh well, House is cool. No. So that kind of thing. I think in that sense, I think we've chosen a good 6 there.
Yeah.
So I think Glover, Wise, I think, and yeah, I think Brad Pitt. I do, because actually I was thinking Pitt or Matt Smith.
They're different. It has to be one of them really because they're the ones that are more strikingly different.
Yeah.
I'm torn between Wise and Dafoe because they kind of occupy a very similar space. I think between the 2 of them, I'd go with Dafoe actually. Okay. So I'd have Glover, Dafoe, and Brad Pitt if I'm going for a really different choice for that 3rd Joker.
Yeah.
So they're all quite distinct, I'd say. You'd know who you were dealing with, but they would all probably bring a different side of that energy to the table.
I think so. And that, I think that if we're going to sort of try and bring this to some sort of close, I think that's ultimately the point when it comes to this whole conversation about the Joker, is that everyone seems to have a very strong sense of whether or not a Joker works, or whether or not a character or portrayal has worked. And it must come down to, it can't all just be about what you think about the Joker, because obviously everyone's going to, essentially he's a bit like Batman. He is a potentially a sounding board for your own issues and problems and what you think of the world. Yeah. But actually, in that sense, I think the reason why we all resonate with him so strongly, and the reason why we've just been able to have like an hour-long conversation about it, is because there is something about this cacophony of energy that exists, and I think, as you were saying quite wonderfully before, a locus of personality that is distinct from an individual. So in some ways, actually, this idea of a rebirth, 3 different Jokers, works very, very, really rather nicely. I suppose one thing I would just sort of end on is just to say if people out there are looking for a bit of fun, I can strongly recommend. There's a book called The World According to Joker.
Nice.
It is a kid's book in that sense, and there's an equivalent Batman one.
Yeah.
It's got lots
I have
of
the Wolverine copy actually.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I've got the Wolverine version of that.
But it's filled with fun little things like a spinning wheel, different incarnations of the Joker.
Nice.
Dark Knight Returns one there. If I suppose if something which is light-hearted captured the Joker's energy, this book's got it's got come quite close for me. But if you had to recommend one graphic novel, what would you recommend for people to read?
For the Joker? Wow, that's really tough because there have been so many good ones in the last 30 years. I realised that. See, here's the thing. Normally I would say Killing Joke, without question, Killing Joke. But the adaptation of The Killing Joke raised a number of problematic issues that it has, certainly from the perspective of the way that Barbara Gordon's character is used and abused and has no agency and is reflective of the way that certain female characters tend to be used and abused in Alan Moore's stories, but let's not get too far into that.
Well, and also beyond that, actually, because there'll be some people out there rolling their eyes at that, going, oh, whatever. But beyond that, actually, just as a film, it was literally a tag-on. The animation style, who's narrating, the focus of everything changes when the Killing Joke actually starts. It wasn't a well implemented addition.
No, it was not well implemented at all. And the joke, I mean, the Killing Joke itself is really problematic as well because the Joker kind of wins, but at the same time, it's a great introduction to the character. So maybe it is still the Killing Joke, even though I've got issues with the book. And it's dated badly, some would say, politically. But it's still it's going to be that or Dark Knight Returns.
Okay.
For me.
And I can see that because in Dark Knight Returns you get a really good sort of postscript to the Joker, don't you?
Yeah.
And in Killing Joke you get bits of everything. But also for me actually, there's one panel in Killing Joke where which one is it? I think it's in the upside down kitchen. And he sort of turns, and he looks like a child. His eyes are slightly
I know the
wet, and he's
panel.
he's sort of smiling, almost looking up at Batman. And you just go, oh god, he just wants to impress him. That's all he wants. So you got all these different. So Killing Joke is there. But I have to say, it does come back to this for me. This isn't a definitive story.
Okay.
But in terms of a fun. Exploration of the psychology of the Joker, what lengths he'll go to, and also his effect on the people around him. This one is a good book.
Right.
And I recommend that in the full knowledge of the context of, for example, A Serious House and A Serious Earth. I suppose what I'm saying is, I wouldn't plonk Serious House in my wife's lap and say, here you go, what do you think of the Joker? Because it will just it'll put her off for life, you know?
Now you've made me think of Grant Morrison's run again, because Grant Morrison's run and his Joker, particularly in Batman R.I.P., are really interesting. Really interesting. That might actually be my modern equivalent. I think I might prefer his Joker to Moore's in a lot of ways. Even though Moore's is the classic iteration that people kind of refer to now. I really like Grant Morrison's Joker because he's an idea and he really explores him as an idea. But no, coming back to your book, Sam Keith, I see. It's a Sam Keith book. I love his artwork. I love his style. I think
Michelle Madsen, Dave Stewart as well. Yeah.
That is going on the list, man.
Yeah, it's got to.
Good looking out.
It's quite a quick read as well. It's good. And again, I won't spoil anything, but something I do quite like again in terms of because I always like it when it comes to Joker having certain consistency. So in terms of what he finds interesting. And I know I was criticising the overly consistent Jared Leto before. But in this instance, he's got an obsession with collecting antique practical jokes, which I find really interesting. And so I always like it when, not just with the Joker actually, but with lots of different characters, when they have little touchstones that they find very important. So it's worth a read. Okay, cool.
Sounds
well,
like
hopefully people at home won't be too annoyed or frustrated with what we've been talking about today.
I'm here to annoy and frustrate everyone. You can like Mark and you can hate on me. It's all right.
But I think this is exactly the conversation I was hoping it would be, because I think ultimately we sort of agreed on the fact that actually no one of those portrayals is actually definitive.
For sure.
And that's what's beautiful about, in many ways, and I think in many ways lots of other comparable characters. So for example, Loki, from the Thor comics, or even, dare I say, Superman. It's really hard to think, there's lots of different people who could play those characters, because they are often monolithic in how they are portrayed. But characters like Joker, frankly, most of the Rogues Gallery in particular in Batman, have so many different little threads to pull on that this has been a really fun exercise, I think. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And I guess I'll see you next time on the Elves Realm Diner.
Same bad time, same bad channel. Different bad time, same bad channel.